Now, public opinion polling has become an essential tool in public policy decision-making, election campaigns, and media reporting. Among others, politicians and policymakers want to know citizens' satisfaction with service delivery, their perceived national priorities, and their political preferences, also their attitudes on the state of the economy. Because polling exerts tremendous impact on politics and public policy debate, it is important that those who undertake polls exercise due diligence and to conform to minimum professional ethics and practices. Not only do polls affect public policy debate, but they also serve as one of the most significant communication links between government and the governed. There is also a huge debate on whether polling undermines democratic process by influencing electoral behavior and election results. And of course, also that will be your question this morning. Do you think in any way that polls undermine democracy by influencing election behavior and results? Do you think polls in any way undermine democracy by influencing election behavior and results? You can hit us on Twitter. Live-NTV is a Twitter handle. Live-NTV is a profile name on Facebook, and 20505 our SMS portal. And allow me to introduce our guests this morning who are already here. We are eagerly waiting for two others to join us as well. Of course, yesterday was a holiday, so there's a bit of, people being slow on the uptake this morning, right? And we're talking about polls. We've seen recently how instrumental polls are when it comes to elections, but do they follow the proper code of ethics and professionalism when they undertake this exercise, right? So let's get the conversation going on Twitter. Just to remind you also, we are streaming live on Facebook. If you're getting out of the house right now, you can continue watching the show on your way to work or wherever you're headed this morning. Allow me to introduce to you this morning Victor Bwire, who is the Deputy CEO of the Media Council of Kenya. Also, we have the CEO of Infotrak Kenya, Angela Ambitho. We're eagerly waiting for Tom Wolf from Ipsos Synovet. He's a lead researcher there. And also Dr. Wale Akinyemi, who is a scientist and, of course, a demographic expert to talk to us as well on polling and the importance of polling this morning. A very good morning to you. Right. Let's just begin, first of all, generally with the politics of the day. Madaraka yesterday and the snubbing of Raila Odinga by President Uhuru Kenyatta. Of course, that took a lot of swipes, I should say, right, on social media, attacking maybe the president. That was not really a good gesture that came from the president. When we talk about unity, then we should go full steam ahead and exercise what we're talking, by actually showing that, of course, when it comes to a pivotal day like Madaraka, we are a united nation. Victor, your sentiments.
Thank you. I think one is the issue of protocol. We might be blaming, without necessarily understanding some of the intricacies outside the politics, but yes, there might have been protocol issues that would, for example, the arrangement on how the leader of opposition was going, was it factored into the program, in the state function program? So that when we are saying they snubbed him, then we are so sure that there were those attempts. Were there liaison between the two offices to ensure that the state is aware that he's within? Because looking again sometimes at the protocol, once in such a national forum, once the president is expected to be the last person to speak. So once the deputy president welcomes the president to give his speech, which he officially confined himself to reading the speech of the day, then sometimes it's not easy to notice. But again, if it was largely because of politics, then obviously we would find that might have been a big oversight on their part. But without that information, knowing how the internal arrangements were, in the sense of was State House and the protocol team aware that the leader of opposition was there, then I wouldn't want to blame any of the parties. But if it was politics, then that's something to be concerned about.
Angela.
I think we live in a society, in a world where we must think on our feet. So protocol or not, when someone of the stature of the former Prime Minister attends a function which you expect him to attend, because all leaders are supposed to attend national functions, then, whether or not you knew he was coming, You eventually have to acknowledge his presence. It is just what people do. And I think in an election year, when some of these things are done, if you look at it from the flip side and say it is politics, to whose gain? Who gains the social capital? Because as you're saying on Twitter, Twitter was ablaze and social media was ablaze with people complaining that that should not have happened. So whilst it may have been a reaction that was emotional, meant to jilt a candidate who is going to be a thorn in the flesh of the incumbent, I think it's worked in the favor of the former prime minister and the NASA presidential candidate. Politics dictates that in certain instances we must practice gentlemanship. And so even if I don't like you, even if we're going to compete, if you attend my function, and you will recall, if you watched the US inauguration last year, the president then, Trump, forgot to acknowledge some people. In fact, he forgot to acknowledge Hillary Clinton. But he eventually, because of what is required of him as a leader, decorum, he did acknowledge her eventually, because it's the thing to do. And I think the minute that it was realized that Raila and the opposition were there, it was only behooving of government to actually acknowledge his presence and give him an opportunity to greet the people.
Do you think the president is really stretching it far down the ground, or down the tubes as well, when it comes to breaking decorum? We saw this happening in Mombasa as well, when he was going to launch the Makongeo market, right? Makongeo market, yes. Then, of course, we saw when there was a launch also of the SGR inaugural ride to Nairobi as well, where the governor was snubbed as well.
I think the president doesn't plan his security, and so that some of these decisions are not made by the president himself, I can tell you. And sometimes, well, he takes the responsibility because he's the head of the team, but sometimes some of those logistical issues are not necessarily done by the president. So we look at, and these protocol breaches were there. 2013, when Kibaki came in, you remember those protocol goofs that faced his president up to very late. And sometimes you also look at, there was the Kenya School of Government, for example, where it was mandatory that once new people come in office and government, they are taken for protocol training and related. Does that happen anymore? And look at sometimes from 2013, from 2007, that was 2003, up to now, you see that most of the, when people are appointed in some of those positions, it's never followed up. We find State House right now, since Kibaki up to now, filled with a lot of private background, who are not necessarily in government previously. Yes. And they fill a lot of those positions. And when they have discontinued the protocol trainings at the Kenya School of Government and the rest, then there are also all sort of those breaches. So sometimes is our some of the people around, as we would say, the presidential handlers, or in matters of protocol sometimes, because when most of the State House positions are filled by people who have political background or political whatever, then sometimes they read the politics in everything. And I remember there was previously there was a person called the chief government receptionist, for example, a full-time government officer who was trained in terms of controlling state, whatever. You remember the chief government MC, Tammy Louis. But if you look at it now, you see that there are a lot of changes in terms of those things. So sometimes it's purely an office logistical related matter that obviously will read politics. Obviously, when, for example, Governor Joho said he would storm or something. So obviously the people around the president are thinking, if we allowed him in, he might cause this and this, And the public space between the president and the governor have been there. So those who are around the president, every time they see political interpretation of some of those events, then sometimes it's not necessarily protocol or government procedure followed, but it's purely now politics at play. And sometimes everybody wants to pull. It's sometimes at the expense of how government is perceived but sometimes that's, like you say, that's the world we live in. We interpret everything in terms of protocol, politics and politics. But some of those things are purely protocol goofs by those who are, because largely when, for example, the president is coming for a function,
yes,
you are not, if you are inviting the president, your program starts after the president talks. You don't give details how the president will talk, introduce, you just say state opening. The details are with the State House, who will then now know who comes to talk. Yours starts after the president leaves. So some of those things, when they are done at State House, then even the organizers of the event sometimes do not even know who will speak within the president's entourage. So those are intricacies that sometimes, but like I'm saying, when everything is a political environment, we are in a political environment where we are reading politics and everything. But to me, largely, and I've done this, I've published in terms of protocol, have we continued training our government officers, especially at some level, on protocol? Is still Kenya School of Government still relevant in some of this? So that most of the people who then occupy some of the, you remember the Nancy Baraka issue at that time, that some of us are appointed from wherever we are being appointed from. Then we come into public senior offices,
yes,
where we are even exposed to handling things like arms, like whatever. But who trains us? Who helps us understand the demands of our new office? So that some people sometimes learn by mistakes, and so some of those mistakes are costly, obviously, both to the country. And so to me, is politics, yes, but having worked in a public agency is that there's a lot of gap in terms of preparing people to play some of the roles they're given to play.
So do we break decorum when it comes to maybe like the launch of a party, where we saw the president is a bit laid back, of course he's donning jeans and is looking like very hip, and yeah, even we can have a musician really just going and sitting, all right, taking the seat of the president. So you want to tell me even that is choreographed, that was planned, that is part of the protocol?
And that's why I'm telling you that largely the people now who organize the president in terms of his political appearances and not necessarily government officers. So they have been amused between private presidential branders and handlers and state government officers, who then it becomes, and you remember when for example, you know, you can't, when for example that happened during the launch, people raised those issues, and there was some time where it was said that was a big extension, in terms of protocol, to allow somebody to sit on the presidential seat. That was a bit of an extreme. But that's why I'm saying that you obviously see where the president is struggling to be a local person who has a local touch. But there's also this, so there has been also, remember, handling a president is not as easy as we outside think. They also push and hold, and where government officers, who are trained in protocol, are insisting this must be done this way. But there are also the private, the people that the president came in, and the people who do he has some private PR agency who are also trying to struggle to present the president in a particular manner that is reachable. So there has also been that. So it's not easy as we see it outside, that is so smooth. They plan and they say president will sit there. So we need to also understand that that's an office, a big office that has too many interests and too many people. Each of them obviously trying to outdo each other in terms of who then finally.
All right, let's hear from Angela.
I think we're being too apologist.
You will know where Victor Bwire is coming from.
It reminds me of Debarl, if you remember, that book that we all, set book called Betrayal in the City, where you have boss and you have Mulili and the likes.
Yes.
And boss is supposed to be protected, and he knows nothing about anything, and he doesn't know because he's not told, so he doesn't know what's happening with his people, and he's therefore, there's this facade, and he's made to think that everything is perfect. I tend to think that that is not the case today, especially with all the gadgets that we have access to. I think, for me, protocol or not, I will reiterate that, sometimes people have to think on their feet and do what's right. And I think in this particular case, there was lacking in decorum, even in the Mombasa case. This is the sitting governor. He is not your friend, and he doesn't have to be your friend.
Yes.
He is there because he has been elected to, head the government, county government of Mombasa. So, the personality issues aside, and yes, he's a fierce critic of the government. In fact, he introduces himself as enemy 001.
Enemy 001.
Enemy 001 of a government, because Mombasa is county number 001.
Yes.
But, you know, be that as it may, I think what the officers then should have done, trained or not, is then have a sitting with Governor Joho before the actual event. If you look at SGR, it was known that it was going to be launched. With the market, Kongowea market, it was known that it was going to be launched. And these are things that are under his purview as well, as the sitting governor. And so to therefore stop him and prevent him from attending such an event is really in bad taste. Sometimes, you know, magnanimity dictates that we and especially of leadership, especially of the person of the president, we take that higher ground. And sometimes when you take that higher ground, I remember when he was in Parliament, was it last year? And there was all that whole charade, when the MPs did all their things, they were whistling,
yes.
And he just took it like, these are not serious people. Who came out looking bigger? It was him, because he didn't take it seriously. In fact, he was giggling. And thinking these are just people who are out to, you know, sway attention, but we will not let them do so. If he took the higher ground with some of these other issues, then people perhaps would view him, especially in an election year, as a leader that they would perhaps consider re-electing. And I think that is where there is this, the people are forgetting in itself what kind of situation we are finding ourselves right now. Some people are doing this because they want to protect their jobs. If it is protocol and they don't know what they're doing, then they're acting from ignorance, but in the sense that they want to ensure that they're protecting their boss. But they forget that in an election year, you want to actually expose the leader to his electorate as much as possible so that they can see that he has positives, whether in good or bad situations.